Hello. Hi, Scott.
Hello.
Good. It's working your end. I'm a complete Zoom newbie, so this whole thing's giving me anxiety.
We used to use Zoom pre-TMP, so
Yeah, see, even at our other agency, we were always teams. So Zoom's like, well, it's like just a COVID thing for like quizzes. That's the only thing I ever used it for.
yeah.
So for webinars, this is a new territory for me.
I'm gonna see if the screen share works, if that's okay.
Yeah, give it a test. Yay.
Is that up that you can see that?
I sure can.
Okay, perfect.
Yay. Is it just you presenting or a few of you swapping between you?
It's mostly me. We're gonna switch to Paul at one point, but
Yeah,
mostly me.
yeah. I think he said he was in a client call, but he was going to try and join a little bit early. Wonder if we'll start to see people going in the lobby when it gets towards the top of the hour.
I'm in the webinar with a hot mic. No,
There, if I sit here and
I'm pretty sure the mic is here. The camera's gonna be my camera.
Okay.
Because that only works with Teams as far as I know.
Okay. Well, then maybe
Or maybe you could sit here.
Yeah. And then I'll join them.
Yeah.
Turn my camera on.
We can just share my computer and you can see notes. It's like, is it time to mute Teams? Two other people are asking me about the slides for the US Summit.
Sorry. Two other people did what? The slides for US Summit.
Oh, two people have asked me for the slides for the US Summit. I'm like, give me a second. I'm doing a thing. That video control go away. My dad is threatening to attend online, you guys.
Oh, no.
Like, please don't.
Hello.
Hello,
Yeah.
hello.
Hi there. My video is not enabled. Is that the case for everyone?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
Do you want it to be enabled, Paul?
It feels a little bit weird to not be able to see us.
I wonder how we do that then.
It's not. I don't think it's the end of the world since it's all mostly on screen. But I think,
Yeah, would be nice.
yeah.
Maybe. It doesn't let you change it yourself.
No,
Says
it's
the
not
host.
allowed by the.
This is the host has stopped video.
Well,
there's two different cups of
allow
coffee.
panelists to start
Sure.
video. Now have a look.
It's you about your hobbies.
I was bringing you a LaCroix and then I realized.
Yay!
Yeah, there we go.
I was saying to Scott Paul that basically at Home Bono, we never used Zoom, did we? We were like Teams the whole way. So I'm a Zoom newbie. So Lila has set all these up for me. So any like settings, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm learning
Well.
as we go.
Well, managed to do that bit
Yeah.
absolutely lovely. Nailing it. Nice, you guys are actually in the same room. That's a treat.
Supposedly we have a couple clients coming, so we thought we should grab a room.
Okay. I guess it's probably relevant to say the US logo demo is not going to work while we're doing this because I'm going to need to use that account for the
Oh, that's fine.
this. But I'm guessing there's not many people in right now.
I think that The session this afternoon at like 3 has more clients in, I think. So that's when the demos will be used.
The one tomorrow, I think the first one tomorrow has quite a few.
Cool.
Isn't the one tomorrow virtual? I was thinking about not coming in tomorrow.
We can look back at the
Traffic this
list.
morning was a nightmare and reminded me why I don't come into the office more than once or twice.
We don't have Leota, do we? Or is Leota?
Not yet.
not?
I don't know. We can tell her to join.
Oh, I'll just flag for her that she's gotten a host link. I would have missed that.
Are we able to? Do you know, Amanda? If we are, if like, do we admit people once we're ready, or do they just join?
Yeah, so once we're ready, I have a little button at the top that says start webinar. So I was going to wait until everyone was here because they're just going to go into a lobby, I assume, like what it's
Yeah.
like when we're trying to join something.
Okay, cool. Because yeah, Leota's introducing us all. Well, I suppose Ali's also introducing us, and he's not here, so got 2 people we're waiting for.
Wonder if it went in their junk because you were all managed to get it, didn't you?
Yeah, it came straight through for me. I'm just going to copy the link into the chat, into the Teams chat, so people have got it.
I don't know if they, yeah, I wonder if it's the same panelist link for you all.
Said, how do we enter the meeting?
Oh, wait, she got an email.
I meant understood.
Okay.
She did not.
Let's see if that works for them.
Good start. Leota, hello.
Hi.
Yay!
It did work.
Really didn't know how to. I joined as a like an attendee.
Ah.
I didn't feel bad because then I was like, I don't know how to do it either. It's like, yes.
So we just haven't got Ali, have we? Oh, here we
Oh,
go.
we do. Hey, Ali. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep,
Okay.
loud and
Yeah.
clear.
That's useful. Good.
Let me know when you're all ready and I will start.
Not going to be any less ready.
Let's go for it.
Good.
I'll press start and see what happens.
Lovely. Are we now live?
So I got 36 so far and climbing.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay. Right, so we might as well begin. Okay, so welcome to AI Week. My name is Ali Hussain. I'm SVP of Strategy at the Marketing Practice. And I'm just going to set up the session, which Paul, Scott, Aaron, and Leota are then going to run. So I just want to talk a little bit about why we're here this week and what the theme of the week is. So everyone has had wow moments with AI, and particularly generative AI, every single week for the past 18 months. And if we move on to the next slide. But the question everyone is asking is how you move beyond those wow moments to harness the power of today's AI technologies. How can they make your marketing both more efficient and more effective? So we'll share some of the answers we found so far, but just as importantly, we'd like to draw your attention to 3 important questions that will help you work out how to get the most from this remarkable technology. We suggest you keep these questions in mind as you listen to each session throughout the week. So first ask, how can this create value specifically for your organization? You'll have heard lots of general commentary on it online, lots of interesting and sometimes useful white papers around and thought pieces around how AI can create value or could create value. But our question to you is, how can this create value specifically for you and your organization? Second, ask, how can you use these ideas and tools as part of a broader tool set? So AI and generative AI have extraordinary capabilities, but they also have limitations and they can't solve everything yet. So these technologies are often most valuable when they're actually used by experts as part of a broader tool set. So think about where these tools fit into your existing processes and also where they might change them. Third, and this is what the icon on the right represents, don't fall prey to the marketer's curse, thinking that everything is new and that new is always better. So some of what the technologies bring, the capabilities, the possibilities, the questions, they're all new and different, sure. But some part of it as well will echo what's happened in previous waves of new technologies, and smart people are going to learn from that. So as Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And so don't just ask yourself what's different about AI and generative AI as you see these amazing presentations you get to see during the week, but also ask yourself how they're similar to previous technologies too. So with that little bit of context, I'm going to hand over to the team to take you through what will be a very exciting presentation.
Thanks, Ali. Hello, everyone. We are so excited that you're here, and we're especially excited to talk about Gen AI and creativity. I am Leo Timor, one of the creative directors at the marketing practice. I'm joined by three of my peers, Paul Holworth, associate creative director, Scott, creative director, and Aaron, an associate creative director. And as you can likely guess, we had AI take a crack at combining our profile pictures and our interests. So that's not really what we look like, but it's worth noting, for me at least, that on this slide, although my interests are skiing and murder mysteries, one of my secret interests is having bangs. And so I'm feeling really seen today. Thanks, AI. All right, onward. So as Ali mentioned, AI is really part of the creative landscape. It is a tool that can drive efficiency, it can empower collaboration, push creativity. And we're really learning here that even as AI evolves, and it's evolving more rapidly than anything before it, there are two kind of fundamental and foundational ways that creatives can use AI today as a tool to help them in their work. And Aaron and Scott are going to walk us through them.
Thanks, Leota.
Yeah.
So the first, we refer to these as kind of the foundational pillars of AI with respect to how it can be utilized in the creative space. Digging into the first one, to us, that really means the ability to expand your creative vision. If you could advance, please, Scott.
Sorry, that's what I did.
That's all right. And we really interpret this in two ways. The first one is this idea of kind of stretching the sphere of influence that you're drawing from when you're in the ideation stage as a creative. And what I mean by that is each of us has a sphere of influence, which is based on and made up of little pieces of things that we have seen or experienced or heard or done in real life. Kind of what you see in your mind's eye is made up of pieces of things that you've seen in real life. So the way that AI comes into play in that respect is it can help us take those experiences, take all those little bits and building blocks that we own ourselves and kind of put them together in new ways that we might not have thought of. Or to expand upon that even further, because AI itself has a much wider, I'll call it a library of experiences and inputs that it can pull from, it can help us kind of see and imagine things that just our minds on their own don't really have the ability to conjure, because it can give us new building blocks that we just wouldn't have come up with on our own. So that's pretty specific to the design side. On the writing side, the same I would say is true of written AI tools. It can help you in the same way to put together words that you might not have thought of independently, or just might not have thought of putting next to one another. It's not necessarily something that you would use as your final output, but it can kind of rattle you out of your own style and your own, if you're feeling like you're in a creative rut, that's a really great way to get AI involved and help it kind of pull you out. So the second element of that is giving you more ability to see creative in context. And what that means is, as marketers, or really more broadly as just people who create in a business space, we always have an objective, right? We're trying to get the audience to do something, feel a certain way, think a certain thing. We're really focused on that, and that's what helps us achieve those objectives, but it can also make it harder to see what we're creating through the lens of somebody who doesn't have that same objective. So one specific tool that I've used that is really helpful in this respect is Microsoft Word's copy editing tool. It now has a little function that can help you scan for non-inclusive language and sensitive geopolitical references, just things that you might not necessarily be thinking about if you're writing with another intention in mind. And it's definitely not perfect. I want to caveat that. And it does not mean that you have to take every recommendation that it gives you, but it can also help you make sure that you're being aware so that you can be intentional with the creative decisions that you're making and not create anything that you didn't intend to create.
Cool. The second part of this is AI really helps us create and collaborate without limits. It can help empower kind of the creative work, especially at the ideation phase, to help creatives get out of their own specialties and get a different skill set than they are native to. It helps us speak one another's language. We can communicate more quickly, more efficiently. Writers can use visual AI tools in order to like get some things out of their head, maybe test out some visuals that they're thinking about. Rather than having to explain their ideas all the time, they can actually show it a little bit more, which is really nice. And designers, exactly the other way around. We can be a little more confident with our language. We can test out our own headlines, see if our ideas are sticking. I've used ChatGPT to help me come up with like, what is the hook? I'm missing a hook for this great idea I have. I know how it comes to life, but what is it? And I took that and gave it to a writer who even made it even better. And so again, as Aaron was talking about, we don't use it as a final output, but for ideation, it's a really great tool. And because of this, we're able to work together and explore multiple possibilities a lot more quickly. We can iterate faster. We can come up with more concepts. We can have more big ideas that are bigger than anything we could create really quickly on the fly because AI can do it for us. So it's allowed a lot more efficiency. It allows us to speak the same language, and it's allowed us to collaborate in a whole new way.
Awesome. So quick summary then, right? We have two major things we can do with AI. We have this ability to expand our creative lens, and then also have some efficiencies around that creative process that are going to allow us to spend more time doing the really cool stuff and pushing things even further. But it's really important to note that, of course, at the center of both of those things is this big, beautiful, beating human heart and curious brain. Humans are, of course, at the center of it, and that's how AI creates value. Because ultimately, as we've all kind of touched on, earlier, AI is a tool. And just like every tool before, its real power comes from the human who is using it and the skills and the talents of that human. I think of it a little bit, I was chatting with my husband last night and thinking about photographers. And just because, like, he used my dad as an example, saying just because you have the best photography equipment in the world does not make you the best photographer in the world. And I think, the best photographers will produce better work though when they have access to and understanding of all of the tools at their disposal. And that's a lot like generative AI for creatives, as finding this new tool, and learning how to best leverage it, learning how to use it, and you're learning how to partner with it so that the results are even better than they could have been before. So that leads us into taking a look at some of the practical applications of generative AI.
Cool. So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but concept exploration is one area where we at the marketing practice have really came to embrace AI because, at the end of the day, if our creative isn't really strong, it's not going to cut through the noise, especially in the B2B world. But AI allows us to think bigger, imagine further, all these things. We can browse existing AI creations for different inspiration at the beginning. Most of these sites have a gallery that people can submit to and like vote on. And you can see some really beautiful images that are very inspiring. And sometimes that makes you think of a prompt or think of a headline or something that you may want to explore further, which is really great. Brainstorming, this example on the top right, that was from a writer who had done some sticky note drawings. of her idea, and I was like, why don't we feed those prompts into AI and see what it came up with? And it came up with these cool like trails through grassy knolls or tree mazes. So it again it allowed a writer to very quickly iterate on a design that she had in her head, and we couldn't have done that before. It would have been just us presenting the sticky notes to the client, which I don't think they want to see. And then we can also kind of pressure test ideas. So this bottom right one, we were doing concepts around how CMOs and CTOs can work together better. And we were like, well, I don't want to just show stock photos of two guys in suits. Like, how do we think bigger? So we started thinking about them taking a journey together. What if that journey is fantastical? What if it's in space? What if it's in a flying car? What if it's in a canoe? And some of that got a little crazy, but you can see how like it really brings our ideas to life quickly, and we can continue to build on that and come up with just some much better ways of bringing ideas to life. We've also used it in go-to-market asset development. It helps us get to great faster, which is exactly what the slide says. We can create the perfect images we need. We're not like relying on stock or combining things in stock, or just, you know, I'm not the best illustrator, and sometimes I try to illustrate. I'm like, I really wish this looked better. This can help that. I can have AI help illustrate me the thing I wanted to do, or I take my drawing and scan it and have AI kind of reinterpret it, and it'll be much better. So we can get to like final outputs a lot quicker. Frameworks, you know, we can put in like a large transcript from a webinar, or maybe a really, really long, I don't know, research paper or something, and ask like a chat GTT to get us to a framework faster, ask it to summarize it, find out the best points, pull out certain questions. Or sometimes you can even ask chat GPT to like ask what questions you should ask about this paper. Like there's so many possibilities that you can do to really expand on the written word. And then also you can use it for additional research. So we've used ChatGPT as like a search engine. So like Google is not always reliable. You often get a bunch of ads, a bunch of junk results. But if you can use ChatGPT to search your question, and it'll pull from, you know, its giant wealth of knowledge to get you an answer a lot faster. And sometimes might even get you to something you can type into Google that will be even better, a much better prompt that will get you to what the real research you need faster. So again, you probably heard the word faster a lot. AI has really helped us be a lot more efficient, ideate quickly, and just have new ways to explore ideas. And next, we're going to do a little demonstration of how that can work in action.
Speaking of ChatGPT, so we wanted to break down some of the steps that it takes and how creatives on the writing side can really partner with AI to get to great faster. So we asked ChatGPT to please write 5 headlines about how AI helps creatives, and it's a pretty broad prompt. Because of that, ChatGPT kicked out 5 pretty broad responses. And this first step is really about kind of seeing, you know, because it's scraping from so many different places. You have your own kind of view on how AI can help creatives. And there's some here that are like, yep, push the boundaries. Yep, digital transformation. Yep, I've heard these things before. And then there's also probably going to be in there something that kind of shakes it a little bit loose, like exploring new frontiers. So although exploring new frontiers is not a new concept in and of itself, it does kind of give you a new angle into this. And so the next step would be to take this, exploring new frontiers, and make the prompt 5, it's a tighter prompt, right? It's 5-word headlines, but then you are doing more exploring. So I'm asking for 10 5-word headlines about how AI helps creatives explore new frontiers. And then it kicks out things that are a little bit more interesting, a little bit more on the nose. And so again, you're going through these things and trying to identify what here resonates with me. And you see something that's, you know, number 7, creativity elevated through AI innovation. Well, as a creative, that word elevated and the idea that my creativity could be elevated is pretty interesting. So we're taking that one, and then we're going to kind of push on it to see what else we can do with it. So then I asked AI to take a break. And just as a note, I find that when you use like human language, the results are better. And I don't think it's necessarily because AI is like, oh, they're treating me so kindly. I think it's because your prompts are better when you say it like you would be saying them to another person, because you speak more clearly. You think about like how I would communicate to somebody else. So initially when I was using ChatGPT, I would just be like, I would write it like, this robot needs to do 10 5-word ads. But as I speak to it more like a human, the results are better. So ask it to take a break, then write 10 5-word ads that convinces an audience of creatives that AI will help them elevate their work. So we got really specific in the prompt. And ChatGPT said, and you can see the response, sure, like, oh my gosh, thanks. Here are 10 5-word ads targeting creatives. And out of these 10, suddenly there was 3 that sounded kind of interesting to me. So we have this word of amplify your creative vision, transforming art, crafting tomorrow's masterpieces today. And so at this point, this is when it's kind of diminishing returns after this. Like we've got 3. I could keep on doing this thing of like taking one and pushing, but it's at this point, this is when the humans really like take the wheel. So what we do is we'll find one and we kind of like continue to push in that with our human brain. So using amplifying your creative vision, and then thinking about that, is amplify and vision the right combo? Maybe not. Maybe it's more expanding my creative vision. But gosh, is it really more than just vision? Because ultimately, it's not just what's in my head or what I'm thinking of it. It's bigger than that, right? So then pushing on it a little bit more and landing somewhere in this territory where it's expanding and elevating creativity, AI, your catalyst to reach new levels of brilliance. And if we think about the initial thing we asked, how does, why should creatives, or how can creatives get more out of AI? I think that was the initial prompt. Then we land in this place that really feels like it speaks to an audience. We're talking about something that's going to excite them, and then we put it into something that makes it even more fun, resonate even more, using AI tools to make that message really kind of come to life. And this is a super like smooth segue to where Paul's going to talk about more of the visual sides of AI.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, I think we've seen some really nice examples of the kind of the theory and the kind of principles we employ in terms of both generating kind of the concepts that we want to inform our overall projects, but also the ways we can bring that to life. And I think these examples probably represent that latter half a little bit better, or a little bit more. So these are examples of real projects where we've used generative AI in order to bring to life our ideas that we've come up with kind of independently. And I think we've talked a lot about speed and efficiency. The area that I think kind of probably remains largely the same in terms of the amount of time it takes is that human processing of coming up with the original idea, and that allows us to kind of put our time and effort into where it's most valuable, and the AI is enabling us to do the kind of the bringing it to life and realizing it portion a little bit quicker, so that we are kind of really focusing our attention and our skills where it's kind of most valuable. So we just saw a really nice example of kind of text effects applied to the demo that Leota walked us through. And that is linked nicely to a project we did recently, or early last year. The idea, or the project, so if we go back for 1 second, sorry. The project was a little bit meta in the sense that it was a generative AI project around generative AI. And so immediately we have a kind of a problem where we're asking a robot, let's say, to describe itself or to visualize itself, which gets a little bit kind of inception-y. But what we thought was kind of interesting is actually, why don't we use AI to elevate the kind of the key message and to illustrate the point we're trying to make? And this project was all around the concept, or the question that everyone's asking themselves around whether or not generative AI is a gimmick or a game changer. And our position was that using these tools can be a game changer, and we kind of use the visual treatment in order to bring that to life. So if we go to the next slide, much like hands, kind of general AI really struggles with generating typography. As you can see on the right, there's a space where text should be. It looks like text, but there's absolutely no way you can read it because that is just an approximation of text. And in trying to bring this idea to life, this is kind of something we initially came up against as a bit of a problem. If you go to the next slide, there's some examples of what we started to do with a tool called Adobe Firefly, which has kind of taken that problem and decided to kind of really focus in on it and solve it as part of a specific tool, which allows you to kind of control not only the individual kind of typeface, but how loose or how tight the kind of effect is kind of mirrors the silhouette of the type. And it allows you to control every facet essentially of the way that the type is rendered. So whereas in the past you might rely on a 3D renderer or an illustrative artist to generate these effects, or hours of Photoshop, in seconds you are kind of deciding what you want your prompt to be and applying it to a typeface of your choice. So for this project, I was aware that there's lots of these existing kind of preset prompts, which are very helpful, but ultimately they're likely to become a little overused. And so we wanted to make sure our prompts were specific to the message we we're trying to show and unique to the concept. Another issue we kind of came up against was actually while we mentioned kind of we don't typically use AI as the kind of final output. In this instance, because the letters were going to be so small individually, and we're using lots of them, we found that actually we could afford to use it as our final product. But the quality out of Firefly, interestingly enough, was a little bit kind of ropey. And so to ensure we were getting the kind of the best ultimate quality out of this, we ended up putting the kind of the raw output from Firefly, which is very good at quickly outputting consistent letter forms, through a tool called Chrome AI Variation, which essentially takes the image and reinterprets it in greater detail, and that's what we see on the right. And then if we skip to the next slide, we'll just see some of those kind of final results. And I think the really interesting thing here is that this is an idea in the past that you might have had and would have ultimately cost a lot of money and time to produce to this kind of level of quality, because you'd relied on the skills of some real kind of craftspeople in illustration or 3D rendering. And ultimately we were able to generate this kind of within a fraction of the time. One of the useful learnings from this project is worth mentioning is the instance we tried to use it for was quite long sentences, and trying to come up with unique prompts for that many different letter forms proved quite difficult. So I definitely recommend using this technique on short sentences rather than longer ones, especially if you're going to require translation, which we did in this case. So if we see this as a kind of a final end product, this next project is a really interesting way of integrating AI into your day-to-day workflow and using it alongside other tools. So we wanted to bring to life this idea of an event stand, and we wanted to ultimately show it in as close to the real kind of version as possible to help speed up that process of selling it in and getting buy-in on the idea. But obviously, when you're working with brand assets, there are strict guidelines around the shape, the proportion, the angles, and those are things that AI is not yet totally kind of geared up for letting you define. And so in order to kind of get over that hurdle and make sure we're respecting the brand and their various rules, we were able to use a kind of a combination of traditional tools and AI. So in this case, we took an Illustrator file that we'd kind of generated ourselves, that kind of gave the overall proportions, the colors, the shapes, kind of set the stage essentially, and then use Chrome's AI sketch rendering tool, which takes a visual input and then will re-render it in a style of your choice and bring it to life in 3D, particularly for things like architecture. And that gave us the output on the right, which suddenly you start to see it in a whole new light. You see kind of you get shadow, you get depth, you get this sense of it being a real space. And then if we go to the next slide, we took that back into Photoshop to ensure that the colors were applied properly and to apply some of our branded materials so we can help to show what this event space would ultimately look like in a far more realistic way, and help to kind of just shrink that gap between kind of our ideas as they appear in our head and what we intend them to look like and what the client is ultimately going to be buying. So there's that level of kind of reassurance and certainty about the final product, which is a really great upside to working in this way. If we go to the next slide, this is a really nice idea, I think, of that idea of bringing what's in your head to kind of to life. And in this case, kind of bringing emotion to life. This was a campaign where all around trying to juxtapose the calm that our client's product offers versus the kind of the demands and the kind of the craziness of life. So we wanted to bring to life key phrases like burnout, being snowed under, drowning, that represent the kind of the emotive side of being overwhelmed at work. And we wanted to literally visualize them and bring them to life, which AI really kind of enabled us to do in a very streamlined kind of way. So if we go to the next slide, I just want to show you a little bit of kind of how we got there. Because unsurprisingly, just typing in snow-covered office into an AI engine doesn't give you much control at all. So what we found was a really nice way of working was to source an original image, in this case from a stock library, that represented the kind of the general setup. We wanted an office, we wanted it to be kind of minimal, we wanted it to have a sense of depth. And then we gave it a style reference, which showed kind of the visually helped to describe what the overall effect would be. So snow covering the top of it, it's kind of piled up, this idea that it's kind of been through a snowstorm. And then this Creative Fusion tool will merge those two images together and kind of reinterpret it so that the image on the right takes on the qualities of that style reference. And as you can see, even down to the color of the chair in the style reference, that's been applied to the image on the right. And if you skip to the next slide, we can see here, I think you might need to click again, oh no, sorry. So yeah, this is where we started from. If we skip forward, we'll see our style reference in closer detail. And then this is just showing kind of how closely mapped the source image and the output are. And this for this project, that was really important because if you were trying to do this just with stock images, to match the kind of the dimensions and the proportions and the sense of perspective would be a really difficult task, which would take a lot of time, and ultimately you probably would never get quite there. Whereas with this tool, it's able to kind of marry them perfectly so that our end result, if we skip forward, has this kind of seamless link between what we see inside, kind of the halo, and what we see outside, which helps to really give that sense that it's kind of reinterpreting the world and kind of completely changing the environment rather than two separate images that don't belong together. So that's a really nice, I think, idea of just the power of AI to bring to life kind of concepts which otherwise just would be really hard to achieve. There's so many cases where we come up with these kind of ideas for how we could treat imagery, but if you can't find the stock image and you don't have the budget to go and shoot it, then it kind of withers on the vine. But with AI, we're able to actually realize a lot of these things, which is very exciting for us as creatives. The next project, I think, is a really interesting one in terms of, well, it's a completely different tool, which we can talk through, but it's a really interesting one around the scalability and this kind of efficiencies that the AI can bring to a kind of a concept. This is a project for a cybersecurity client who wanted to kind of change the conversation around cybersecurity from one that was focused entirely on the kind of negative sides of threat protection and focus more on the positive opportunities it enables, such as creating value. And so in order to do that, we decided we wanted to reinterpret a kind of a symbol that is synonymous with the industry, but which traditionally is kind of shown in a very kind of cliched and overused way. Kind of, I'm imagining blue glowing lights in a dark environment, which is kind of the visual language of cybersecurity. And we wanted to completely turn that on its head. But in order to do so without AI, it would be, again, contacting an illustrator or a 3D artist and spending a lot of time kind of working up what these concepts and these visuals might look like. Whereas using this tool, we're able to very quickly pull together kind of quick examples, something we can put in front of the client to get their buy-in before developing further and starting to scale it, which in this case, we were able to do to a really large extent. So to achieve this look, if we go to the next slide, what this tool enabled us to do was take a source kind of silhouette or icon in this case, and we chose the lock because it is synonymous with cybersecurity, and we can type in a prompt for how we want to kind of render that source image. So for this campaign, we were thinking kind of scenery, kind of different materials or different characteristics that it could embody, and the output from those prompts is that lock embedded into a variety of different scenes. And so if we skip through, we can see how that kind of, well, quickly, how many variations this offers us, which when it comes to things like personalization for different industries and scalability to make sure that kind of what we're doing is tailored and remains fresh and can respond to kind of quick changes and direction and quick stimulus. It's just, it shows the kind of this breadth and scale this enables us. And what's really nice about this campaign, I think, if we go to the next slide, is the end result is completely unique to Palo Alto. This is something that kind of we could never have got through stock. This is something that is an idea that's completely owned by them. And for those of you kind of in London and traveling perhaps through Waterloo at the minute, if we skip to the next slide, you can see that actually this campaign is completely live, which is particularly exciting for us to think that something that kind of was born as a kind of generative AI idea is currently out there live and essentially dominating the Waterloo out of home as it currently stands. So hopefully if you're traveling that way, you can keep an eye out and see our work in practice. I think the last example I want to just talk through is actually around limitations of AI. This was a project where we wanted to show how heavy vehicles, like industrial vehicles, how they could benefit from sustainable fuel, essentially. This idea that we could kind of lighten the load as a metaphor for their physical impact on the environment. And so we had this really nice idea and we wanted to bring to life heavy vehicles as balloons. These outputs, I think, these are the closest we're able to get in terms of having AI interpret the characteristics of balloons in terms of the bulge and getting the level of detail right that makes it feel convincingly like a balloon, but also recognizably like the types of transit we're talking about. So I think these kind of did the job, and in terms of selling in the idea, they were more than adequate. They told the story really nicely. But what I think is interesting is it highlighted a kind of a gap or a current gap in the ability of AI to pull together visual, like every visual. We kind of imagine it can do everything and anything we ask of it. And it may be just a kind of a challenge around prompting and developing our skills as prompters, which is a really kind of crucial skill that we are all kind of honing and developing as we go. But it also shows kind of it shows the kind of the role of human taste and kind of style, I guess, because we can look at the image on the left, and while it looks quite convincingly like a kind of a balloon a realistic balloon that you might get of a bus, it doesn't actually look very good. It's not something you'd want in your advert. Whereas on the right, it looks kind of far more, the production value is much higher, but it starts to lose the realism or that sense of it being a balloon. And so it's on us, I think, to gauge what works and what doesn't, and to bring that human element into the story. Another example here, just of that same idea. On the left, again, I think it feels too childish and too basic, whereas on the right, it kind of overblew the level of detail and made it far too it's more balloon-like, but far too specific, which again broke the illusion that this is a balloon. And so I think, yeah, it's an interesting ending point to talk about the kind of limitations, because it leads us on to what we see kind of coming up in the future. So as we currently stand, generated imagery for us is primarily used for kind of early drafts and not final imagery, and that's due to the pixel resolution, the overall quality, the level of detail, and kind of the odd artifacts and fragments. But as kind of in the next 1 to 2 years, we see the kind of resolution and accuracy will reach a point where it can actually be used for like a billboard and images of that scale. It's worth pointing out that the digital out-of-home stuff we were doing was in pixels, and so it's a very different level of scale, even though it's physically big. Reproducing a printed billboard of that scale would have been something we would have advised against. Another thing is generated video. With the release of Sora from OpenAI, it's just taken a huge leap forward. And you can see when you contrast what was happening a year ago in generated video to now, just the speed with which that technology is accelerating and improving. And so we think generated video, while it's currently limited to specific users, within the next 2 years, we can see that being widely available and something that will allow us kind of greater creative control than just stock imagery. I imagine we'll be augmenting those two things. Tools use primarily kind of text-based interfaces at the minute without much control over the output, whereas we're already starting to see companies, particularly people like Adobe, starting to develop AI-first creative tools with visual interfaces that are really designed for allowing human artistry and control in the way that we are used to with Photoshop, but currently limited just to describing what we want to see. And then personalization of assets is something I think will start to emerge much quicker. We already start to see it with things like video avatars, where you can create a kind of, for want of a better word, a deep fake of yourself and have it present whatever the script you want is, and have it do it in various different languages. But we can see that starting to be something that you see across all sorts of different assets. So you could imagine a car ad where for different regions, the scenery in the background is updated so that it represents the local region and the local kind of wildlife and scenery. So these are really exciting things we kind of imagine coming up along the pipe, but we're not quite there yet.
All right, so we are coming up to the end here. One of the final things we have to show you are a couple of live demonstrations, or at least one. We wanted to tee that up with some kind of best practices that we've been abiding by as we're utilizing AI. We get asked all the time, what are the rules? How do you apply this technology? And honestly, the long and short of it is currently developing so quickly that it's hard to look to another source to guide you on how you should be using these tools and this technology that is developing under our feet as we're kind of going through our workday. So the way that we've kind of come up with how to guide ourselves in its use at the marketing practice is, first rule, Leota mentioned this a little bit earlier, treat AI like a partner. It is not doing your work for you. It is not taking things necessarily off your plate. It is a tool that you can use in the same way that you might use a counterpart in some ways, to make sure that you are spending your time and your creative energy on the things that only you can do. Second one, and I'll say this is true of creatives as well as AI itself, give it plenty of context. It's really, really important to understand what the output is supposed to do, how it's going to be used, what you need to get from it. Leota gave some great examples of that in the brainstorm of just kind of different ways that you can ask a tool to give you what you need, but you need to be really intentional about what those inputs are, because the output is only going to be as good as the input. And the last thing, treat what you get from AI as first, not final. We can't say this enough. We've had a lot of great examples throughout this presentation of, you know, ways that we've used AI to get an idea to a point where we could communicate it to the extent that a client or a creative counterpart says, yes, keep going. At which point, that's when you do the photo shoot. That's when you go and find the illustrator who can create something from scratch in this very specific style that you need. And it just helps you kind of get across that bridge from this is just an idea in my head to this is something that I can tell somebody else about effectively and take it somewhere.
Okay, so we wanted in the offices in London and Denver currently, we have some live demos demonstrating a few of the different kind of tools and ways we're using AI at the minute. And we just wanted to give you a quick taste of this kind of stuff in person. So if I just share my screen quickly, let me know when you can see that. This is right. Sorry, 1 second.
It's the downside of 3 monitors.
Yeah, my Zoom is not letting me share my screen. 2 seconds. Can people see that?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, that's really. I didn't think that was going to work for a second. Okay, so part of the demo was taking an existing logo and just looking at how we could bring that to life using some style references. So similar to the snow-covered office we looked at in the example before. And so we pulled together a bunch of different reference imagery that we can use to style it. And we wanted to show you kind of how quickly this stuff can be brought to life. So if I pull in a reference image that I picked earlier, here we go. So what it's going to do is it's going to kind of take the silhouette of our BlackBerry logo here, and it's going to take the precise outline of it, and it's going to apply the styling of this image on the right. And so if I click generate, you'll see how quickly it's pulling these examples together. So it'll typically give you 3 examples, and the results of this is quite often relies on a little bit of trial and error. You'll see some examples will respond slightly kind of differently. Some will be kind of nice and well-rounded. And in this case, I'd say kind of they've nicely merged the two together, but we're kind of lacking a little bit of kind of clarity or space around the logo, so that there's probably something we could do to update it. So things like style intensity would allow you to change how much it brings on the style of the previous one. So that's just a quick kind of example of how quickly you could imagine creating a, I don't know, if there was a topical event, something like Easter coming up. If you wanted to create something for social media, you could imagine taking your logo and applying kind of the Easter theme or an Easter style reference to that to create a kind of a fun 3D-esque rendered version of your logo. And it's just that tool kind of applied to all sorts of different creative practices is something really really powerful and really exciting that I think is worth looking at. And stop sharing and we can go back to the presentation because I think we want to leave some time for questions. There we go.
All right.
For this one, I'll just call out what this is, but we won't do it live because I want to leave some space for questions. if any of you were, for instance, taking notes during this presentation or anything like that, this QR code on this slide here is a link to a copy demonstration where in much the same way that we showed you in the earlier kind of brainstorming session, it'll walk you through the steps that you take with an AI to turn something like notes from a conference into social posts or blog posts or something like that. You'll definitely see those outputs will be first, not final, but the purpose is to show you how quickly you can get to that first stage with the hope that it will give your brain something to do to take it in closer to the direction that you want it to go.
All right, we've got one question. We have, do you have a list of AI apps you recommend?
We do. So it's not something that that I know of that we've shared publicly, but internally we've been doing a lot of experimentation and a lot of kind of crowdsourcing. So we have a kind of a bit of a community of practice internally where we share things we found, we share good examples, and we each experiment with various different tools. And so the list at this stage is quite long and probably a little bit unwieldy in its current form, but I think it covers a lot of different practices, from writing to design to media to development. And so yeah, I think it's something we could share if there's a particular kind of area we want to focus in on.
I would say too, like the types of tools that we're using depend on what we need to, we want to use them for, right? So I think some good examples were, looking at the differences between like Chrome and Firefly and what you can do with those things differently. Like, I'm trying to get this kind of effect, so this tool I found is better at that type of thing, is a lot of the conversations that we're having. And that way, like, we're able to use a variety of tools. And as Aaron mentioned, like, there's new ones every day. And part of the reason why there's 4 of us on this panel is because we're really it's really indicative of how we work together at the agency. Is we're all learning, we're all sharing, we're all like gathering as much and trading as much information as we can, so that we are like collectively up-leveling all of our abilities to use these tools to their like most effectiveness. That's not a word. You know what I'm saying. I'll ask ChatGPT what I'm saying. Any other questions? You can just drop them into the Q&A. All right, here we go. Have you had a chance to use Google Gemini in a similar way? If so, any thoughts?
I have not.
No,
I have not, but like now it's something I'm going to go try.
No, it's not. It's I've seen some really interesting videos looking at the kind of what I think they describe as multimodal approach, which allows it to kind of consider not just text, not just image, not just kind of isolated elements, but bring those all together in the way it responds. But I haven't had a chance to play with it yet, so I have no personal insights for you, I'm afraid.
I will say I've turned on the Google Labs feature of letting AI find your top search result, which is interesting and not always super accurate, but I don't know. I can see how Google wants to use AI, and I think that's pretty interesting.
One more question. What is the ideal length for prompts to generate desired results? That's a great question. I think it really depends on at least in my experience, and I'm sure everyone else has thoughts as well, depends on what you're trying to get out of it. So, sometimes, like, for example, for ChatGPT, it can learn, like, you can ask it to learn a whole thing, which technically is like an enormous prompt. But then, like, what you're actually asking it to do, I find it's almost like the more you're speaking, it's almost not so much the length of it as the more you're speaking to it as another human really results in the best like outcomes. So the reason, like if you put on a human filter, how would I talk to another person I'm asking to do this? The more specific you can be in those things, it seems to me that the better the results are.
It is nice that you can kind of, again, this isn't really length of an individual prompt, but just approach for entering that prompt. I found that it's really much easier to get something close to what you were looking for if you break it up into individual kind of questions. So don't ask it to do 14 things at the same time. Ask it to do one thing, congratulate it, tell it to take a break, then ask it to do the next thing, then ask it to do the next thing, so that it kind of builds and works with you. This is why we say kind of treat AI like a partner, because it can perform tasks like that sort of in a session that might just break it, frankly, if you tried to ask it to do it all at once.
That's a great point, Erin.
And I think from a visual point of view, I think it's less so about length and more just about kind of level of detail. So I think it's where the idea of the kind of the human plus machine idea really comes into its own, is that if you kind of imagine what it is you want to see beforehand and can like have a mental picture and you describe it in all its detail, then what you're going to get is going to be far closer to what you really want, and you allow you far greater control over the output than simply, if we take the example of the background here, just typing in waterfall. You could get a kind of waterfall in like in a million different kind of environments. You might end up with a frozen waterfall in a tundra where you really wanted a kind of tropical waterfall. And so, yeah, basing it on what kind of specific ideas rather than just general terms is always going to give you kind of greater granularity and control.
Yeah, and tools like Creative Fusion that Paul showed, if you're not getting the result you want, that one will let you add words to it too. So if it's like not recognizing the logo for whatever reason, you can be right. You can be like, I'm looking for a logo in a waterfall area surrounded by Colorado environment or something. And then I got much better results. So sometimes adding words to the visual prompt can also be helpful.
Good questions. Anything else out there? Okay, well, it looks like that is it. We have a bunch of other sessions going on this week. If you go over to the marketingpractice.com, you can see all the other sessions and check them out. And as Erin mentioned, there are prompts in Office, and there'll also be prompts available online. So go ahead sorry, not prompts, demos available in Office and online. So go ahead and check those out as well. They're really fun. And it can really, kind of like help explore the possibilities no matter what your discipline is. And is a good way to kind of jump in.
And if demos scare you, there is somebody in the office who can help you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for coming today. Oh, all right. Someone said thank you. All right. I was like, another question.
Yeah,
Just
great question.
We love
You're
those
welcome.
too. All right. Have a great rest of your days, everyone.
Everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.